eventually sometimes to be more drawing into it. But he used a lot of the texture and the quality of the surface comes from the way he manipulated the paint. And for me, the medium, I don't know if you ever heard of Marshall McLuhan. He said he was a Toronto professor of media or something. He wrote books and he studied media. And he came up with this phrase, the medium is the message. That if you're making a picture or you're watching TV, and whatever the program is on TV, is only a little bit of the story. It's the pixels in the screen of the television that you're participating in, and your eye and your brain are creating the picture out of these little incomplete pixels. And that's true with painting. That's something that Nelson and I shared. It's like another language. There's French, there's English, and painting is a language. And the medium is the vocabulary. And one of the things that struck me when I first saw Nelson's work was not just the oxen and the guy and the Acadian, Acadie, but the method that he made that image, the surface. For me as a painter, that was just as important as what he was depicting. And he has a unique way of doing that. And this guy is Delacroix. You ever heard of Delacroix? French, whenever he was 1798 to 1863. So he was well into the 19th century, just before the Impressionists. And there's a picture here of, here's the painting of Delacroix. It's Dante, the bark of Dante. The subject is from literature. And there's a little detail here of drops of water on one of these nudes here that are half in the water. These little drops of water. And there's this little detail of the drops of water, how he painted them. And before Delacroix, they painted drops of water sometimes on people, but they would paint it dark and light, just neutral colors. But Delacroix has green, yellow, and red. So he almost like an impressionist, painting color where it's just dark and light. And the Impressionists loved him, and they picked up on him. He was just before the Impressionists. You know the Impressionists, Monet, all the paint, just paint, and the paint is not trying to be smoothed out and make the picture. The paint is part of what it's about. And they were painting, and they used that method to express the light on things rather than the actual surface of things. Everything was about the light. There's a shift in emphasis, and that shift in emphasis you can find throughout art history. Da Vinci, The Last Supper. The table in front, Christ in the middle, the disciples. And if you look at that painting, I must have it somewhere. I have to find it in my notes. Here it is. This is a good comparison. Da Vinci was like the height of Renaissance classical painting. He represents the peak of a certain style. And that's The Last Supper. It's not in good shape in this photograph because he experimented with pigment on the wall. Instead of doing a fresco like you're supposed to do, in the Renaissance they did fresco, which was fresh plaster, and the color goes into the fresh plaster while it's wet. They would only plaster a certain amount, and they would do that part of the painting, and it would dry, and then they would spread more plaster. And Da Vinci was trying something new. He tried regular paint, oil paint and tempera, and as a result, the moisture came through the wall and wrecked the painting. But it's been fixed up, and they fix it up in reproductions. Anyway, we all know the painting, and the point I want to make is, in the Renaissance, this was what felt right in a painting. There's what we call a picture plane. the surface of the canvas. And the table and the figures are all spread out parallel to the picture plane. It felt like to him the right way to do it. And if you tampered with that, it didn't look right. And later on, there was a painter very soon after Da Vinci called Tintoretto. And he got in trouble with his master, Titian, because Tintoretto painted the Last Supper, but instead of, there's Da Vinci right there looking at the table, right? Point of view, straight on, like that. Tintoretto went over here, and he said he painted the table in perspective, so it's diagonal and it's getting smaller as it goes into the picture, and the disciples are all getting smaller as they disappear into the painting. And Titian threw Tintoretto out of his studio. He said, you know, too rebellious, too bizarre the way he was painting. And that was just the beginning. Tintoretto was like transitional. And after that came the Baroque period. And the Baroque, well, they loved diagonals, and they loved swirling shapes and things coming and going into and out of the canvas, whereas in the Renaissance, Da Vinci, everything had to be contained and neat, horizontal, vertical. That's called classical. And this is a Rembrandt painting. This is a good comparison. This is the ultimate in a Baroque painting. This is a Rembrandt painting of some thing, I don't know, the oath of somebody. I'm not really interested in what it's about. What I'm interested in is use of light and shadow. It's called chiaroscuro, not just light and dark, but clear and obscure. Everything is dramatic. The light, look at the highlights and the darks, compared to Da Vinci's Last Supper, where everything's kind of evenly lit. It's almost like fluorescent light compared with a spotlight. And in the Baroque era, the taste of people, of painters and people looking at paintings, had switched emphasis to this more dramatic effect with like a searchlight off on Tintoretto's Last Supper. Everything is dark and light. Like Nelson, you always know where the light's coming from with Nelson Surette. He built up this side's light on the face, dark, shadow. It's always like that. And Nelson has made his forms very solid. It looks like, really, they exist in space. They look round and in space. And that's when it started, was in the Baroque era. And Nelson picked up somehow on that. I don't know where he got it, but maybe looking at pictures. But I asked Sheila if Nelson ever went to a museum and saw real old masters, and she said she took him once, maybe to New Brunswick, to that collection over there. What's it called in Fredericton?
Lord Beaverbrook.
Lord Beaverbrook. It might have been there that she said, or he might have gone. No, he went to Ontario too. She took him to Ontario one time. They went to the Ontario Art Gallery. So I don't know if he ever went to the National Gallery, but he did see that sort of old master stuff or samples. So he did have a little bit of that. But Nelson had the capacity to look at something when he saw paintings like that, and he'd keep it in his head. And he could go home. He would go down and look at a boat, and he'd run home, and he had it in his head. Which for me, I can't do that. I have no clue how to do that. I either have to take pictures or I have to have things right in front of me. So with my friendship with Nelson, that turned into an interesting, it's like, I don't know if it's a left brain, right brain difference, but we were so different that way that, he used to tell me, because I loved schooners and dories, fishermen, I love the sea and all that culture, and he used to say, paint a schooner. I wouldn't know where to begin. I don't know how to paint a schooner. For me, I have to have everything right here, and I'm a still life painter because I put everything right in front of me, and I have to see it right there and work on it right there for school. But Nelson had it all in his head. It was a completely different kind of brain than me, and I think that was contributed to our friendship too, that we each admired the other point of view. Street. Anyway, that's the way I look at Nelson, because I have this art history background. When I look at him, I'm looking always for that stuff.
But he must have gone to libraries and that, look at books.
I'm sure he looked at pictures. Absolutely. He had art books in the house. So he did see stuff. And he was influenced by that. Excuse me?
I'm going to say later years, him and his wife went to Toronto for the winter.
Yes, they used to go, because Sheila was there, I think. They spent the winters there. So he did see stuff. And he was influenced by stuff. I've seen, there's a Jack Gray, who was a Nova Scotia painter from Lunenburg area. Really classic Lunenburg schooners and fishermen and dories, similar to Nelson. Nelson knew of Jack Gray's work, but he Nelsonified it. He transformed it into Nelson. When Jack Gray painted people in a dory or on deck cutting fish, it's a very different feeling. The guys in Jack Gray's paintings look like they could beat the sea back. It doesn't look like the sea is threatening them. They're all got